right-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Welcome back to another episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner with me, your host, Harry Symeou. And I'm delighted to say that on today's episode, I'm joined by a very, very special guest. Alexander from the Different Knock and the Cannon podcast is with me. Welcome to the show, mate. Good to see you. We haven't met before, so this is our first time meeting virtually, and we're going to do a podcast together. Incredible. How are you?
It's the way of the world, man. It's good. Yeah, I'm good, man. I listeners maybe would like to know. I DM'd Harry because I listened to you on the Arse blog. I thought you were brilliant. Just out of just to say congratulations and well done, and then here we are. So yeah, no, absolute pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
He slid into my DMs.
I slid. That's what I did. Yeah.
I'm kidding. No, thank you for your message, mate. But honestly, I've been watching your videos for a little while now. I came across them, I reckon 2 or 3 months ago, and the editing that goes into them, the way that they're put together, I just think is fantastic.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.
How many hours a day do you spend putting together a video?
Well, I've recently taken over the edit myself, and I'm now going to start passing. I used to have an editor, and then it's sort of it's become a bigger and bigger task every video. I'm trying to sort of up the levels and stuff. So yeah, I'm going to take on a bit of a team now. But yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool. It's a weird time to be chatting to you, though. I think we were just saying before we got started. It's a bit of a weird sort of crickets and what's that called? Tumbleweed. The stuff that rolls across the screen. Yeah, the tumbleweed sort of era. So yeah, we'll see what we get up to.
Yeah, it's a weird time. I was saying to you off air that for me, I was moaning at the end of the season, like that I was just burnt out, and it got to the point where you're sort of traveling all over the place, and it's great because you're really lucky and privileged to be in a position where you cover the Arsenal, but it always gets to me the last couple of months of the season where I just feel like I'm really burnt out because you never stop over Christmas, you never really get the opportunity to take any holidays or whatever. And yeah, we end up getting to that final stretch of the season and you just feel absolutely knackered. But after a week of like rest and recuperation, I just want to get back at it. Like I want to be talking about actual football rather than just transfer rumors, rather than just stuff that might not even happen. So yeah, I'm glad the Euros are kicking off this weekend. That gives us something to kind of sink our teeth into. Are you excited about the Euros or are you very much Arsenal and nothing else?
I'm not. I have to say, I'm not a massive Southgate fan. As I like it. Do you know what? I like him as a person. I think he's done a lot for the England setup. But I've always said he's a director of football. That's what he is. He's a director of football. He's not a coach. And you see that he's really ambassadorial. I love how he represents England. I love how he's brought the culture together. I love what he's done, sort of, at St. George's Park and all that stuff. I think he's brilliant in so many ways. He's just not a coach. There's people I follow on Twitter that I think have more football knowledge than him. Do you know what I mean? It's mad. So I'm hopeful because I think we have one of, if not the most talented squad, maybe out there with France. But I look at the likes of Portugal with is it Roberto Martinez, and Germany with Nagelsmann and stuff, and I just think there's I don't know, my hopes wane. But you never know. You never know.
You never know. It's true. I always find international managers really difficult to judge because they only get their players like every few months for a handful of days. And like people always say to me, England don't have a defined style of play. Okay. But how do you actually implement a style of play when you barely see the players? I think, there are certain nations that you sort of associate with certain styles, i.e. the Spanish and keeping control of the ball, right? That is something that we always attribute to them. And they always seem to appoint coaches that like to do that, and they have the players for that, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think it is much more difficult on the international stage. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Gareth Southgate because I know that annoys people. Whenever people jump into the live chat, they go, this is an Arsenal pod. Why aren't you talking about the Arsenal? So let's do that. And let's begin by talking about an update on Benjamin Sesko that was dropped by Fabrizio Romano earlier today. Now, he's a player that a lot of us probably started to believe was on his way to Emirates Stadium. We did a scouting report video on Benjamin Sesko a few weeks ago, and I was hoping that that would have some shelf life throughout the course of the Euros and you know, throughout some of the transfer window. And it turns out that actually nobody of an Arsenal persuasion is probably ever going to watch that ever again. But this is what Fabrizio Romano had to say. He said, "We expect Benjamin Sesko to sign a new contract at RB Leipzig. It's agreed. It's going to be completed really soon. He is not going to the Premier League. From what I understand, he believes this is the best decision for his development." What's your kind of initial reaction to that? Because when we were first linked with Benjamin Sesko, I wasn't massively keen on it. He wasn't a player that jumped out at me. It wasn't a signing that I thought we desperately had to make this summer. But over the course of like researching him and digging into kind of what he's all about, his strengths, maybe some of his weaknesses as well, I started to convince myself that actually he's a pretty good fit. And now we've had this news that actually he's probably not going anywhere and he's going to stay in Germany. And I put a poll out on this earlier on, which I'll share the results from a little bit later. But what's your initial reaction to the news that Benjamin Sesko seemingly won't be joining Arsenal?
Yeah, it's a huge topic because it you know, really it precipitates the conversation of what are we trying to do in terms of our forward line this summer? What, you know, how are we trying to remodel it? Which way do you want to go? And I think there's a number of ways to go. I do think the midfield and forward market are actually, people always say, oh, you know, the market for this or the market for that. Actually, there's quite a few options out there this summer that I'd be looking at. I think Šeško is a brilliant option. Let's just speak about the player first. I think in terms of under 21 striking prospects, he's up there, man. He really is up there. In terms of what I like about him, once he turns it, we did some scouting on him as well. I wonder what you'd agree with this as well. But because of his size and height, he's not the sort of quickest in terms of acceleration. But once he gets going, his top speed is wild, and I think we need a bit of pace. I love his the way he hits the ball off both feet. His hang time in terms of when he's getting up there. I think he's a really willing runner. He works hard out of possession. I like a lot of stuff about him, his frame, etc. I will say on the sort of the negative side of things, I do think his heading could use some work. I'm not sure how brilliant he is under contact. When I was watching him link up, it's like he didn't want you know how Saka holds the man.
Yeah,
could sort of allow a runner behind you or whatever it might be, or allow a sort of 1-2. Sesko just wanted it first time round the corner every single time, and I think we need a centre forward who can hold the ball up in a different way. I wasn't sure about him as a box presence. I can't remember if I said it. I think his heading could use some work. So there were things that I was going, yeah, there's a lot there, and he could be, you know, with some coaching, a brilliant prospect. You can't teach that the way he's hitting the ball. You can't teach the you know, obviously you can't teach the height and the size and the sort of the pace and stuff. That is just kind of innate and inbuilt. So there was a lot to like. And then it comes to a question of putting it in the deal and putting it into Arsenal this summer and saying, okay, how do we actually approach this? And I was thinking, okay, if we're signing Šeško, I'm okay with that as long as we go and do something else out wide. And I think there's options in Rafael Leao. I think there's options in maybe Nico Williams. I would put him at the bottom of my sort of list. I think Isak could be another option, not necessarily alongside Šeško, but you know, you could, if you wanted to, you could go put him out wide. I'm not sure you do that. Leao, Rashford, I can't remember if I said, but I mentioned as well. I think there's a lot of options out wide that you can go and have a look at. Kvaratskhelia, Napoli. There's a lot of options, and pairing him with one of those, I think could have been the move. It's not happening. I think it's the right move for him. So in a way, it's like that thing when in relationships, when someone makes a really sensible decision and you go, oh, we shouldn't really be together. And it's really sensible. It's really amicable. And it makes you want them more because you're like, you're so sensible. It's just so annoying.
You're so level-headed.
You're so level-headed. I think we should be together. It's probably the right move for him. It probably is, because I think he's not going to get big minutes at a big club this season. It's not going to happen. He's a brilliant prospect. In 18 months, in 2 years' time, I'd be looking at him going, he could be the guy. But is he the one to come in and help us beat Pep next season? Not on his own. See what I mean? So it's a shame, but I think there's other ways of doing it.
I'd agree with a lot of that. I think that, you know, the idea that he was going to come in and he was going to play week in, week out and sort of fire us to glory, I think that was people getting ahead of themselves. I don't think Benjamin Sesko today is I was going to say much better, but I don't know if he's better at all than Kai Havertz, for example, at that centre forward position. I think he's got the potential to be better than Kai Havertz, and I think he's got the potential to grow into a far more potent centre forward. But today, would I play him ahead of Havertz? I probably wouldn't. And I was looking at this very much through the lens of, if the price is right and we're going to bring this guy in and give him the opportunity to develop without lumping a load of pressure on him and saying, you are the main man and you need to fire us now to glory, then I think actually it could have been quite a smart move. In terms of your assessment of the player, I agree with loads of that as well. And the thing that really kind of jumped out at me when I did a bit of scouting on him was some of the stuff, not necessarily in front of goal, but, some of his all-round game. So assists, he was in the 38th percentile for assists. For shot creating actions, he was in the 33rd. Passes attempted, that didn't fill me with confidence. Pass completion, progressive passes. I know people will say, well, that's not what you're bringing him in for. What you'd be bringing him in for is to be on the end of those chances and converting those chances. But I think our centre forward at Arsenal has a massive role to play in our build-up. And if you bring someone in who doesn't have that ability to link up as well as they need to give you tactical flexibility like Kai Havertz can, then it might not necessarily work. And listen, obviously the club are not as big on this as everybody thought, because I honestly believe that if Arsenal really wanted this, they could have made it happen. But it feels like they've kind of, I don't know if I want to use the term half-arsed it, but they've kind of like gone and found out what his situation is, but are probably not in a position to want to dump a load of money on him. Is that fair?
I think you'll know better than me on this, but I think we sometimes misunderstand what clubs do from the reading you do and the sort of conversations you hear. You can kind of build up a picture, right? Clubs are looking at situations, and for example, there's links to Xerxes coming out, and it's saying, "Oh, Arsenal are after Xerxes." Well, what might be happening there is Arsenal are monitoring Xerxes, are aware of his situation, because Arsenal, Edu's job is to know the jigsaw of every centre forward on the move this summer. Because if he moves there, he might move here. If Sesko doesn't move Leipzig, they don't need a new striker. And if they did, and what's happening with Nketiah and what's happening with, Armando Broja, and you need to know every single situation, not because you're interested in every single player and need a detailed dossier on them, but because you need to know, okay, well, if that happens, then there's 10 days window there where I know he has a release clause. All that information is important. And then what happens is it gets out to the journalists and you get, Arsenal are interested in Xerxes. What are we doing? These are completely different players. I think there's scenario planning. And I imagine, sort of picking up on what you were saying there, is if you take the case of Sesko, they were probably saying, well, look, if there's a case where we can get Sesko in on okay wages, we can go and do that release clause, he's really keen, and we can go and get that winger that we're interested in scenario X that we've got, then that's a great version of a window. Or if we can't go and do that, then fine. In which case we'll go and do scenario Y, and there'll be a different thing. So I think unless you're looking at a Rice level talent, where it's kind of you are putting yourself in a Rice or bust, which is for those types of talents, I think you go and do that. Or maybe I don't think Arsenal have been in this position many times where they can go and do that. But say you're putting yourself in for Jude Bellingham the summer before, whatever it might be. That's when you go, he is our plan A. That's it. We're not moving. We'll go all out for him. But I think when there isn't that type of talent on the market, as far as I see it, there's just lots of good options. I would suggest it's a case of scenario planning and going, right, well, in scenario A, we'll do this. Scenario B, we'll do that. And it sounds like this is one of those situations. And I think you're right. You don't then need to lay all your cards on the table for someone that you're going, look, if we can get you and something else and that works out, then great. But if not, we're not scuppered.
Absolutely. And I always felt uncomfortable with this idea that, we had to do this deal before the Euros. That was what was being peddled, right? It was, he's got this release clause until the end of June. He's going off to the Euros with Slovenia. And actually, we needed to do this deal this week. Like, that was kind of what we were hearing. And I said on an episode a few days ago that it's just incredibly unlikely that we're going to do any major business before the European Championships kick off. Doesn't mean we're not putting our ducks in order. It doesn't mean that we're not researching and speaking to people, but to think that we were going to complete business. I mean, the window's not even open, for God's sake. So you could only go so far in the process, right? I think Hacker has described this brilliantly, what you were talking about there. Transfer Tetris is what he called it. And I think that's a great way of putting it. I did put a poll out earlier today that I just want to share with you guys the results of. And the question was, how are you feeling about the news that Benjamin Sesko looks set to remain at RB Leipzig? And it's interesting, the results to me, because 33.7% have said disappointed, 6.5% have said we've dodged a bullet, and 59.8% have gone down the indifferent route. That's what they feel, indifferent to this.
One of them was me.
Was it? So you're kind of like, if it happens, great, I'll get behind it, I'm on board with it. But if it doesn't, then I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, right?
Look, just quickly, Sesko was never going to be. If we'd signed Sesko and done nothing else, then I don't think we've done what we needed to do this summer. But if we'd signed Sesko and say signed Leao was my scenario. Let's say scenario X was sign Leao and sign Sesko, and we remove Nelson and Nketiah from the squad. That's improved. That's a massive improvement to both the first team, and that's a massive improvement to the future. That's and we've raised the floor of the squad. So that, if it was in tandem with something else, then brilliant. If it can't be, then fine. And I'm with you. Whenever it feels like there's a sort of pressure to get something done quickly, I always go, no.
Yeah, because it's just unrealistic, isn't it? Like, it amazes me that, like, for example, right, you go and buy a property. You know that process takes ages. And
it's the estate agents. Every time there's people that they're going to offer.
Yeah, they're going to offer. Get on with it quickly. Come on. I remember when I was buying my place, long time ago now, but I had this absolute, I'm going to use this term on the pod, I don't care, bell end of an estate agent that was trying to sell the place. And he called me up one day and he said, what do you think? And I said, look, just speaking to my mortgage guy, and I'm going to make an offer tomorrow. He said, okay, cool. I called up the next day, make the offer. Great. I'll put it to the couple. Okay, cool. Calls me back. They've accepted your offer. Brilliant. Thank you. He's like, okay, let's get the ball rolling. No problem, mate. I'll get the ball rolling. Within 3 hours, he called me back to ask me if I'd arranged the survey yet. I said, mate, it doesn't work like that. And like, people think that football transfers work like that. Like, that was spending a fraction of the money that we would ever spend on a player. And like, just people think that these things move really, really quickly. And the truth is that they don't. We now know that in Declan Rice's case, for example, we were talking to him from January to make that summer move happen. So these things, they can take a while. Obviously, stuff can happen under the radar that you're not aware of. And you can be further down the line when you find out about something that maybe you initially thought. But it's just one of those things, isn't it? You mentioned something there, which is a really nice segue onto the next part, which is, what do you think we need to do this summer? You mentioned that you don't think that a Sesko signing in isolation would have been the answer or the solution. It certainly wouldn't have ticked all of your boxes. What else jumps out to you as needs for this group then?
Yeah, as I say, it wouldn't have been enough. I think the way I like to view it is through skill sets and what we have and what we don't have. And I've said this a few times on different knocks, so apologies if you're listening to me again. But essentially, I felt we needed pace. I think we need a bit more box presence in terms of someone who can, if you look at, I'm not saying you go and sign Osimhen, but as an example, Osimhen's box presence in terms of how he holds off defenders and could create a shot and get that kind of separation. I think we needed a kind of moments type player. I think we've seen, Athletic said this week that there was an article come out and saying, the Arsenal hierarchy felt they were missing some kind of X factor from the forward line. I felt that too. A kind of ability on the transition. I think, for example, I don't think City can play in the way they do at the Etihad against us in that block if we have someone, again, not saying you go and sign him, but like a Rashford who can transition in the way we want them to sort of fear that we can. Yeah. A couple of other skills, probably, shots from outside the box, maybe, probably a little more aerial ability, just sorts of things. So I put those sort of skills out there. I say I think we're missing that from our forward line. And then you start to have a look at profiles. Okay, well, Osimhen's got some of that. This is just for kind of for the forward line. I think as I mentioned, Leao's got some of that. Isak's got some of that. Rashford's got some of that, and it just depends how it all sort of fits together as a jigsaw. And for example, Sesko would have brought us some of that. I think a bit more quality on the transition. I think a little bit more sort of maybe devastation in that way. But is he going to be the real box presence, the real sort of the guy who can maybe make the moments happen? I don't think yet. So then you have to go and sign that. And then in terms of the midfield, it's a tricky one because I don't know how you feel, but I feel if we had Vieira, Smith Rowe, Partey, Rice, Erdegaard, Jorginho as a 6, if they were all at their absolute best, like peaking, and they're all in good form, not injured, whatever, that's a really good mix. That's a really good profile mix. You've got progression, you've got creativities, you've got carries, you've got defensive solidity, you've got a kind of metronome in that. You've got everything.
Yeah.
I think the midfield massively for me depends what you lose. So I think if, for example, Smith Rowe goes, I'm looking for something a bit more penetrative and maybe looking at an Eze, something like that. Again, he'd probably want to play. So is that what you want to do in your most balanced midfield? I don't know. I like the look of Kudus, so I think could also play on the right-hand side and be the sort of Saka backup, which I put a video about today. I think the price would probably be prohibitive. I don't know. The midfield feels to me like there's the most. I like the look of Adam Wharton. I like the look of João Neves. I wouldn't be surprised if Arteta's got names we haven't even heard of on a list somewhere. So for me, I don't know how you feel on the midfield, but I feel that's probably the least clear. And then just quickly to finish up on but with the most options, and then quickly just to finish up on the goalkeepers and defenders. I think goalkeepers for me, my first pick. Well, my first feeling is if you can't improve on Aaron Ramsdale, don't do it. Don't sell him. We've got an option for a year, an extra year. And even if not, okay, maybe we make a loss and we don't sell him, but we don't want to get worse. What we don't want to do is go and sell him for £15 million and go and sign a worse goalkeeper for £15 million. Don't go and do that. You may as well just keep him and let him go on a free because it's the same net.
Absolutely.
Net costings. So I think this is one of the shifts that we need to do as Arsenal fans. We're cozy, nice Arsenal, and we're a family club, and I love that about us. But what happens at Bayern or Madrid, they're keeping him around unless they can get a better keeper. Sorry, it doesn't matter if you've signed a contract. That's it. Finally, on defenders, I think the only thing we're missing is a central centre-back profile to support Saliba. And for me, it's very clear you go and get Ousmane Diomande. I think Diomande, both feet, the variety in his passing, strong, can defend over the shoulder. He'd fit in perfectly. And I don't think he'd want to play every single minute either. So I think he'd be brilliant.
Yeah, he's a good option. He certainly is. Just to take it back to the midfield for a second, a player that you told me that you've seen quite a bit of when we were speaking a little bit earlier is Youssouf Fofana. And according to Ryan Taylor, Arsenal are admirers of the Monaco midfielder and have held initial talks with his representatives. However, at this stage, discussions have gone no further than that. He's a name that I've heard loads over the course of the last few months, but I have to admit I haven't seen a great deal of him. Do you think he would be the right fit? Is he the right fit if Thomas Partey goes? Because that seems like that's more and more of a possibility. We've heard today that some of the Saudi clubs have a serious interest in him. It's not the first time we've heard that, but you do feel like Thomas Partey's time at Arsenal is coming quite close towards its end. So is Fofana the man for you? Would you be interested in him?
Yeah, we did some scouting of him on the Cannon podcast. I think, as I say, if Partey went, Fofana is definitely a really good option. I think you lose some things and you gain some other things, is what I feel with Fofana. I think, especially for the price he is, because he's in his last year of his deal, he could be 20 million euros or 30 million euros. I think that's a really good option. He's incredibly progressive. Every touch goes forward. When we were watching on the scouting, it was kind of unbelievable. And I don't think we have a player like that. I don't think we have someone who is literally their entire thought is go forward. And you thought Partey was progressive. He is just every ball goes through the lines, goes to the sort of the closest and most direct route to goal. He's got probably a better shot on him from outside the box off both feet than Partey. I would suggest he's probably just a better all-round passer than Partey. I think defensively, Partey's stronger in terms of his aerial duels, in terms of how his ground duels and stuff. Fofana's a little bit weak in his technique and how he does that personally. But in terms of price to, say a dream scenario where you could go, right, can we get 40 million for Thomas Partey from Saudi Arabia? I am dreaming. And you go and sign him for 20 million pounds. That is an unbelievable bit of business. That really is an unbelievable business to get Fofana plus profit. That would be unbelievable. So yeah, I maybe again, the midfield feels like a real jigsaw to me. And it's all dependent on who goes and who stays, really.
It's difficult, isn't it? What do you think about departures? Is Emile Smith Rowe off as far as you're concerned? I just don't see where he fits in. at Arsenal anymore. And that sounds horrible because, you know, he was he is a huge talent. And when he broke through, I was really excited about him. Injuries have been an issue, obviously, but it also feels like the team's evolved and he's maybe got a little bit left behind as well.
Yeah.
I would be quite happy if somebody came in with an offer of 30 odd million quid for Emile Smith-Rowe to just let him go. I get frustrated when people put ridiculous valuations on a lot of our players, because I don't believe that if you've hardly kicked the ball for 2 seasons, like is the case with Emile Smith-Rowe, that you can argue that we should still be demanding 50, 60 million pounds for him. Yeah. Add to that what the market looks like with the way that PSR's taking a grip. I mean, we're not here to talk about Aston Villa, but Aston Villa are getting a rotten deal for Douglas Luiz, in my opinion. And they're forced to taking that deal because of the situation they find themselves in with PSR. So it just feels to me like Emile Smith-Rowe is one that we need to move on. And I think it's as much for our own good as it is for his own good, because while he's there's always going to be that chat. Why isn't he playing? Why isn't he getting more opportunities? But he just needs to play, doesn't he?
Yeah, I concur on the valuation thing. I think a part of it is I've sat here on podcasts for the last couple of years and said, look, I'm never going to go too hard on the selling thing because we're not in a position of strength yet. We are now in a position of strength. And what that means is you don't have to sell. We don't have to sell Emile Smith-Rowe. We can, it is an option to just have him around and even layer on top. That's what you get. That's the privilege you get as a big club. We also have a lot of room for growth in terms of wages. We have money. I think there's a weird sort of narrative that Arsenal are going to, I think we'll break another record this summer in terms of what we spend. Honestly, I really do. I think you look at the Champions League revenue, you look at the comments from Josh Kroenke, you look at the room for wages, wage growth, loads of stuff. That there's a lot of, and also the precedent we had the last 3 summers where our spending has increased. I see us spending a lot this summer. So we could layer on top and keep Smith-Rowe around and not have to sell. And that's the position of strength you get to. So I think we can demand a good price. 50, 60 is too much. I think it's all. I think, again, maybe there's a question mark about sort of similar to the Ramsdale thing, where are we being nice, supportive Arsenal again? If Emile Smith-Rowe was at Real Madrid, what would they do? And I know it's a false equivalence because we're not Real Madrid. We can't be Real Madrid, right? But we're trying to get there. We are. We're trying to go and compete with these clubs. We all sat there in April and wanted to beat Bayern Munich. Did we not?
Yeah, of course.
So if we want to go and beat them, then we have to start acting like them in the ways that we can, right? And I look with someone like Smith-Rowe and I think, what would happen at Bayern? He wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be there. If they went and got an offer of 30, 40 million pounds, he would go there. The only thing, and actually someone, Forward on Football has just put it in the chat, it's a good point. Smith-Rowe is a very specific profile who I don't think we have. So I think with the Smith-Rowe, you do accept maybe 30 million and you start to come to the negotiating table, especially with a Premier League club. You start looking at that and saying, okay, how do we do that? But I think you need to have a very clear plan of someone who can receive high in a block, someone who can carry, someone who can drift out wide from midfield. I don't think we have that many profiles. I would argue we don't have any other profiles like Smith-Rowe. And I would also suggest that I saw his performance against Luton in that home game, and I was really impressed, not by his on-ball stuff, which we all know about. It was his off-the-ball stuff, his defensive contribution that I was really impressed with. If he can continue to do that, you never know. So I don't think if Smith-Rowe stays around this summer, it's not the end of the world. Again, I think this is going to be a situational one. But I do think we need to remember this is quite a specific profile. I think someone like a Partey, not the quality level, but you can replace him to some degree. I think Vieira, you could probably replace that to some degree. I think Smith-Rowe, his blend of skills is quite specific.
I agree with that his role is his profile is very specific. But I guess my playing devil's advocate here a little bit, because I would prefer to see him stay, okay? But I just think that we have to get past this. As you said, it's Emile Smith-Rowe. He's an Arsenal Academy product. We have to give him 1,000,001 chances when actually he's not really of huge benefit to the side at the moment. And if there's an opportunity to get some money in that allows us to do something else, we've got to take it. I think he's got a very specific profile, but for me, he's a 10. He is a 10. He's not this left 8 that people want him to be. And let's be honest, nobody was ever talking about Emile Smith-Rowe as a left 8 until Mikel Arteta adopted a system that includes 2 number 8s, and all of a sudden people were desperately, in my opinion, trying to find a way of making him relevant again. I just don't think he's that. I also don't think he's a left winger. You know, when he first broke into the side and he was playing really well, he was playing from that left-hand side, but it was him constantly coming inside. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, that Mikel prefers Martinelli at times above everybody, even when Leandro Trossard is far more clinical. And I know Trossard played at the end of the season, but there were long periods where Martinelli was out of form and still playing. And that's because he stretches teams. That's because he can hog the touchline. It's because he gives your team something very different. Smith Rowe doesn't fit in any of those brackets completely for me.
Yeah.
And I get that he is unique, but at the same time, I just don't see where he fits. Therefore, can I justify keeping him, you know, for what? For the odd occasion where we need that drifting number 10? I don't know. It's a hard one.
No, I do agree. I think I agree. I agree with you once we're talking, 25, 30 million pounds. I think if someone's offering you 10 million, no. But we have to be strong. But I think, this is what, again, when people say unique profiles, it's like, well, yeah, a unique profile doesn't always mean it's a good thing. It doesn't, it's not always a good thing. You have to take in a million different factors. But I also just think from the club's perspective and from his perspective, he probably wants a fresh start anyway. It's just one of those things where it feels like it's come to a bit of a natural conclusion. And if I was him, I would be pushing to leave this summer. I really would. I'd be saying, mate, give me a chance. Please let me go, or a loan swap with option or whatever it might be. So yeah, I agree with you on that.
We're going to take a really, really brief pause. When we come back, though, I want to get you guys' questions for the remainder of the show. So start dropping them into the live chat. Put a little cue at the beginning of the question because it just makes it easier for me to pick them out from the chaos of the live chat box. So please do drop in as many as you can, and we'll try and get through as many as we can in the allotted time. I'll give Alexander the opportunity to basically tell you guys where you can find him if you're not already subscribed. I'm sure a lot of you are, but if you're not, where can they find you, my friend? How can they find the brilliant work that you do?
Appreciate it. So you search The Different Knock on YouTube. I'm also available on the Canon podcast, which is also on YouTube and on Spotify and so on. And then I'm also on X, Twitter, @AM on football.
Are you getting used to calling it X now? I feel like I've finally got there.
I think I'm there. It's been about a year, isn't it? I'm nearly there. I'm sort of still doing it slightly post-ironically. And at some point, I'll just do it normally. But there you go.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Right, short pause. When we come back, we're going to take all of your questions. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the podcast. Okay, I think I know the answer to this one. But given that we've just been talking about it, Halo has asked the question, would you accept a £25 million bid for Emile Smith Rowe if it were to come from Fulham? What would you do, he says?
You have to go case by case. On this, I would say no, because they're Fulham. They're in the Premier League. They've got money. I think if you're getting asked that from even, say, Juventus, I think you might, because I appreciate, that they're probably higher up in their league, but honestly, the disparity between the Premier League and other leagues is mental. I think if you're selling within the league to a Fulham, look at their revenues. They've got the money. So I'd be asking for 30, 35 at that point. You're not trying to, make it prohibitive, but I also don't think his wages are too crazy either, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, probably if it's Fulham, I'd probably be asking for sort of another 5-10 mil. What about you?
I think I would try and squeeze them for 30. But if I'm not getting anywhere and I'm getting close to the window and the players express the desire to move on, I don't think I would allow the deal to collapse for the sake of 5 million, if that makes sense. But I agree with you. And this is the other thing as well, right? Because I did an episode a little while ago where right at the end of the season, we kind of went through the squad and we talked about potential departures. And I put like prices that I have in my mind for some of those players. And obviously some of those prices, in a lot of people's opinions, were quite low. But I also think it's really dependent on what market you're looking to sell this player to, right? Relative. Exactly. Like if you're talking, let's just throw him into the equation for a minute. Fabio Vieira, okay? The likelihood of another Premier League club signing Fabio Vieira, I think, is really low. I think if you're going to sell him, you're going to sell him abroad. And then it would be foolish of you not to take into consideration that, for example, if he went back to Portugal, Porto do not have the resources that even the likes, as you mentioned, of Fulham and West Ham and, anybody in the Premier League for that matter have quite a lot of the time. So you're going to have to accept that if their likely destination is overseas, you're probably going to get less money and you have to adjust your expectations. I don't get why people find that so difficult to kind of comprehend. Next question comes from Pelzer, who says, if Emile Smith-Rowe left, would you take Eze from Crystal Palace as the replacement? And I know that Eze would cost more money, right, than we would get for Smith-Rowe. I think that's fair to say because his stock is really high at the minute. Emile Smith-Rowe's isn't for the reasons that we've been discussing. But I think with Eze, the fact that he could play from a flank quite comfortably and probably play in, I don't know, is he more suited to an 8 role than Emile Smith-Rowe? I don't know that he's perfectly suited to it, but is he a more in-line profile maybe with what Arsenal are looking for, judging by the way we play?
I can only say what I like about I love him centrally. I really love Eze centrally. I think he can play out wide, but even in Glaston's system, he's kind of a dual 10 coming inside. Do you know what I mean? He's never quite been a wide player in the way Mikel plays things. I think £60 million, if that is the release clause, which is the rumor for Eze, I think you possibly go and do it. It would depend. I think for me, Eze would be a Smith-Rowe and Vieira replacement. I think if you sold both of them, I think then you can go for Eze because he'd take them. I mean, how many? Vieira got like 300 minutes or something last season, and Smith-Rowe didn't have much more. So, is Eze going to play 1,500 minutes for Arsenal? Of course he is. So I think you could definitely eat up those minutes. I also think you've got to look at Wanyeri as well. He could also be the sort of the Saka replacement or the sort of rotation option. I think with Eze, although again I do think I prefer him inside, but I think with some coaching it could be there. Again, yeah, I don't want to be too fence city, but it is all jigsaws. If Smith-Rowe left, would I take Eze from Crystal Palace as a replacement? Yes, if Vieira was going, because I think if Vieira's still here, I'd be asking what we're doing with Vieira, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's probably that situation. If just Smith-Rowe left, I'd probably give Wanyeri a run in preseason and see how we feel, and then look to maybe sign a prospect as well. I'm not quite sure. I think we need, as I say, that the skill set is quite specific, and I don't think I think I look at how we're going to. One of the problems last season was how we broke down mid blocks, and I think one of the things is being a little bit more progressive through the. Firstly, is ironically Fabio Vieira in terms of the half space crossing. I think we can improve on that, and maybe moving Martin Odegaard around a little bit more. That could all happen in different ways, and how you do that is a question mark. But also carries and breaking through blocks and going through blocks. I think we get that with Timber a little bit, maybe. But I think Smith-Rowe is going to be someone who possibly could be really useful in terms of, what teams have had success against us this season. Porto, Villa, Bayern, and Fulham. Those 4 mid-block teams have done that. And I think one of the ways is with a fit and firing Smith-Rowe. So I worry about losing that profile.
Fair.
But there you go.
Fair. Reed says, do you think we would comfortably be able to sustain our current form in terms of competing for the title by, instead of making major signings, trying to promote academy prospects? I mean, I've spoken about this quite a bit on here. I'll throw over to you, but just really quickly, top line from me. I just think the gap between academy football and the top level is so huge right now. And I think of a group of 25, 30 really good academy prospects, you'd be lucky if 2 of them make it to the level where they can represent Arsenal at the highest level. And that is just where I feel we're at this moment in time. So I don't think we can sustain being at the top end of the Premier League constantly if we stop moving in the market and decide instead to focus on those players that we currently have at the club.
Yeah, I think we could do a whole podcast on this, on the academy and how we approach that. I think Chido Obi some news today about how that's going to work. Also, the context being that Bayern can sign him professionally and we can't yet, and there's loads of stuff to talk about here. But to answer the question, I think I would concur with you in the sense that for someone to come in and have the impact of a Bukayo Saka or say an Ashley Cole, you have to be a generational talent, literally generational. There's no point slowing down to to kind of appease some kind of academy prospect type, to whatever, or to make things happen. However, I think there is a way we can use the loan market. We can hopefully buy the new Carabao Cup system, but also better usage in the cup competitions. You can give some players some opportunities to go and show that they are ready for academy level, and then get them out on good loans and start making those 5 millions, 5 millions, 7.5 millions, 10 millions. There's no reason Arthur Okonkwo should be leaving for free this summer. Absolutely no reason. You could get him out on loans earlier. He's 22 and he's playing for Wrexham, and I think he was one of their players of the season. He's going out and he's going to leave on a free. Murray Hutchinson, another perfect example. We should be getting that 20-25 million from, I think he's rumored to be going to Ipswich Town. 6 months later, he went to Chelsea. He moved to Chelsea in January 23, I think it was. Summer 23 went out on that loan, comes back, and he's worth that amount of money. If we'd given him that opportunity, then we could be the ones making that money. I'm sure the club are looking at this. It's the most obvious area of development. Actually, I know the club are looking at this, but the sense I get is we can use that better while also accepting that the people who are going to get in the first team, and to sort of answer this question, are we going to win major signings by bringing up academy prospects? Probably not, but I think we can improve. The only person I look at is Wanyeri and think maybe.
Yeah, me too. He's the one I look at now, and I think you could make the step up. And I've covered a lot of the under 21s games over the course of last season. I did the commentary on a lot of them. And I just look at that level of football, and I just think it's just worlds away from, what we're watching on a Saturday and a Sunday. And I think you're right. It might not be that these guys come through and take the team on their shoulders, maybe like Bukayo Saka has, but they can certainly be utilized better. They can certainly fund what we need to do in the transfer market a lot better than they are currently, because we've got 21, 22-year-olds, as you say, that haven't barely played any professional games of football. And you need to be getting those games under your belt, whatever level that is at a professional level, so that you can build that experience and be in a position where you can help teams and you're an attractive prospect. Just a couple more. We'll do them really, really quickly. Forder on Football says, what's more likely, 2 midfielders or a centre forward and a winger, in your opinion? I think it's 2 midfielders is more likely than us going out and getting a centre forward and a winger. But what's your take on that? Yeah,
I would like to think we're going to go and do 2 things in the forward line. I don't think we will, if I'm being totally honest. I just don't think that's Arteta's way. I think he's I can't see us completely changing 2 out of the 3 in our forward line before next season. I just can't see it happening. So I think we'll probably do 1. So yeah, more likely 2 midfielders, but probably more likely because I think Partey, Smith Rowe, and Vieira are all probably not likely to go, but likely to be in conversations around going. And therefore, we could do something in there. I think for me though, the problem is basically we got to ask the question: where do we want to spend if we're going to spend superstar money this summer? Where do we want to spend it?
Yeah,
and I think for me, the forward position, I think I looked it up, our top 10 most expensive signings, only 2 of them are forwards. And we have to go and put some money in that area. I know we lucked out a little bit with Saka and Martinelli, but I think we have to go and put money in there, I think.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Speaking of putting money on centre forwards, we heard earlier today, of course, as we discussed, that Benjamin Sesko will not be joining Arsenal this summer. But another name that's been touted, and one that people seem to be very interested in, is Joshua Zirkzee. Now, we did hear earlier today that he is very close to joining AC Milan, and that looks like his most likely destination. But put that to one side for a minute. Is he someone that in your mind would have been a good fit? Because when I spoke about Sesko earlier, I said, looks like a good goal scorer in the making, but probably doesn't give me enough in the build-up. With Zirkzee, I would say the opposite. Brings you so much in the build-up, but probably doesn't give you that potency in front of goal. And that's why I have reservations about him. Are we missing a trick by seemingly allowing him to join AC Milan?
Honestly, I haven't watched him enough. So I can't really talk about him particularly. I've watched a lot more of Sesko. The only thing I'd say about Zirkzee, I from what I have seen, I agree with you. He's a lot more comfortable in build-up. again, does he solve the problems that we feel like we're missing from our forward lines? Is he so different from Kai Havertz that you can bring him in as a completely different option? I don't think so. But again, I need to watch more of him. The other thing I'd say about him is I think his agency or his agent is Kia Joorabchian. And I think the likelihood of us dealing with Kia Joorabchian is extremely, extremely low.
He was a famous old friend of Eddie's in the past, apparently. But yeah, you're right to make that point for sure. Mate, thank you so much.
Pleasure.
It has been a pleasure to have you on. There we go, 45 minutes on the nose. Just as we said, it's not often that happens. Normally I'd keep people for longer and yeah. But anyway, great to have you on. Thank you so much. Just remind people again where they can follow you, how they can subscribe to your brilliant work, and plug the video that you put out today, which I thought was really insightful around Bukayo Saka.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, it was the different knock, and put a video sort of detailing the backup issue. I think it's something we've all sort of spoken about at some point, the Saka backup, how we solve that. But yeah, you can find me on there, find me on the Cannon podcast, and on X at AM on Football. Appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you for joining us. As always, make sure, guys, if you haven't done so already, please leave a like on the video. For the number of you that have been watching, the like count is not very good. So let's hit the like button on your way.
Come
out.
on.
It literally takes a second.
Come on, people.
It's free. It's bloody free. It doesn't cost a thing. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're on audio, we are on a mission to build up some reviews on the podcast platforms. We're trying to get to 500 on Apple Podcasts. We're trying to get to 1,000 on Spotify. So please do leave us those reviews. It really, really does help, particularly now that we've gone independent on the pod. So yeah, your support is very much appreciated. I will see you all on the next one tomorrow. I have no idea what we're going to talk about yet, but we'll come up with something between now and then. I'm sure there'll be some ridiculous rumor flying around somewhere. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great evening. All the best. Up the Arsenal.